Chapter 71. Ancient Tomes of the Isle of Ravens. Archmaester Marwyn. Lo Quen's voice was steady. The evidence speaks for itself. You've read the High Septon's own words. Prince Rhaegar did not abduct Lyanna Stark. At least on that day by the god's eye, they were of one heart, freely joining as husband and wife under the gaze of the seven, swearing a sacred vow. Marwyn slumped into his chair as though his spine had been ripped away. Clutching his head, he groaned in anguish. But why? Why would Rhaegar do this? He already had a lawful wife, Princess Elia Martell. She gave him Rhaenys and Aegon. Why? He could not understand. As a Valyrian of ancient blood, his loyalty naturally aligned with House Targaryen. To him, Rhaegar's actions were nothing short of self-destruction. Lo Quen stepped closer, his tone carrying the weight of history. The dragon has 3 heads, Archmaester. You and Maester Aemon were close, you must know the prophecy. After birthing Aegon, Princess Elia was frail, unable to endure another child. Rhaegar, he must have believed it utterly, convinced he bore the duty of saving the world by bringing forth 3 children, 3 heads of the dragon. And it would not have been without precedent. Did not Aegon the Conqueror wed both his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys? Marwyn lifted his head, sorrow and confusion filling his eyes. I know the prophecy. Aemon cherished Rhaegar, believing him the prince that was promised. But does prophecy excuse betraying his marriage vows, trampling on Dorne's loyalty, and enraging the wardens of the north? He was a fool. He could have secured his throne first, then considered it. And he should never have chosen the betrothed of one of his bannerman's heirs. Gods. He shook his head in despair. And the faith, the sanctimonious hypocrites. How could they consent to preside over such a blatant act of bigamy? Was Maynard mad? Lo Quen considered for a moment, then said thoughtfully, Prince Rhaegar was no fool. He may have promised High Septon Maynard some great boon, perhaps special privileges for the faith once he took the throne. But the Targaryen downfall came too swiftly. Under the stag's crown, those promises could never be honored. For the faith, revealing this truth would be a scandal of the gravest sort, one that would shatter its sanctity and authority. So the survivors, and the faith itself, chose silence, burying the secret forever. Lo Quen mused privately that Maynard must have been a rare sort of man, writing everything down in his diary. He patted the old Archmaester's shoulder, trying to pull him back from his grief. Archmaester, enough. The past is done. What matters is the future. Marwyn let out a bitter laugh. The future. You uncovered this book for one reason only, to use it when you invade Westeros, didn't you? Lo Quen shrugged. If Aegon the Conqueror could do it, why shouldn't I try? Marwyn barked out a laugh, incredulous. Aegon had 3 dragons. How many do you have? Lo Quen met his gaze calmly. That depends on your brilliance, Archmaester. Marwyn glared at him, struck speechless, unable to fathom what trick this cunning Easterner was preparing. Enough, Archmaester Marwyn. Lo Quen cut the tension with a timely shift. Let us set aside this unpleasant lesson in history. I have one last request, something that requires what little influence you still hold within the Citadel. Marwyn's face darkened at once, suspicion sharpening his eyes. You want to dig through someone else's diary now? Lo Quen shook his head, his gaze settling on the ring of keys at Marwyn's belt. I've heard that each Archmaester possesses a unique master key, able to open nearly every door in the Citadel, even those forbidden halls closed to ordinary apprentices. His voice carried a quiet curiosity. So tell me, Archmaester, what secrets are hidden in the deepest vaults of this fortress of knowledge? Marwyn sprang upright like a cat with its tail stepped on. I knew it. I knew you weren't here for honest reasons. You're after the Citadel's hidden hoards. He jabbed a finger at Lo Quen furiously. Even if I gave you the key, it wouldn't help. The Citadel is full of eyes, apprentices everywhere. Your face stands out too much. You wouldn't even reach the locked gates of the forbidden books before guards or meddling students stopped you. Lo Quen said nothing. He only smiled faintly, raising his hand and brushing the ruby hidden in his sleeve. A faint, almost imperceptible ripple of magic spread across his body. In the next instant, before Marwyn's horrified eyes, Lo Quen's features, build, even his clothing twisted and changed. In just a breath, the figure standing before Marwyn had become another, Archmaester Marwyn. The same shabby clothes. The same crooked nose. The same protruding brow. Even the sharp, irritable glint in his eyes was mimicked to perfection. Gods, 7 hells. Marwyn's eyes bulged round as saucers. He pointed a trembling finger at the mirror image before him, struck dumb. Lo Quen rolled his neck, adjusting to the new body, then raised his hand, palm up, calmly meeting the real Marwan's gaze. Marwan's face twisted through several emotions before collapsing into a sigh heavy with defeat and resignation. With a bitter curse, he yanked a key from the jangling ring at his waist, the oldest-looking one, etched with fine runes across its surface, and slammed it into Quen's palm. Take it. Go on then. I'll never set foot in this damned citadel again. Do whatever you please. Quen closed his fingers around the cold metal, then, imitating Marwan's gravelly voice, assured him, don't worry. I'll just have a look around, satisfy my curiosity. I won't cause trouble. HMPH. You've stirred up more than enough already. Marwan rolled his eyes, slumping back into his rickety chair and turning his back with a scowl, as if to say, out of sight, out of mind. Quen didn't linger. On his way out, his sharp gaze caught a rolled parchment on Marwan's cluttered desk. He tugged it free and unrolled it. It was a detailed map of the citadel, carefully drawn, marking every tower, library, and hall. I'll borrow this, Quen said, giving the map a shake. Without waiting for a reply, he pushed open the door and strode into the maze-like corridors, wearing Marwan's face as his disguise. With the map as his guide, he headed straight toward the restricted libraries marked with special symbols. His steps mimicked Marwan's impatient, distracted gait. Apprentices and junior maesters hurried past, but when they caught sight of his familiar face, they simply bowed respectfully and scurried aside. None dared question where the eccentric mage was going. Yet after checking several rooms labeled secret treasures and ancient manuscripts, Quen felt only disappointment. The books and scrolls were ancient and rare, some filled with forbidden knowledge, but none contained the crucial secrets of dragon incubation or taming, especially nothing on reawakening, dragon egg fossils. It seemed that after the dragon's extinction, the citadel had deliberately suppressed, sealed away, or even destroyed such lore. Standing in a quiet corridor, map in hand, Quen frowned, weighing whether to abandon the search. Then his eyes strayed to the map's edge, where the Honeywine split around a small island within the citadel's grounds. The island bore a name, Isle of Ravens. At its center was a lone building marked with a symbol. Ravenry. Ravenry. Quen's pulse quickened. He remembered now. One of the citadel's oldest buildings, once the stronghold of a pirate lord, later converted to house the most ancient and least used records. The most obvious places were often the most secure, but the forgotten corners of history, those might hold real treasures. He changed direction at once, following the map across a wooden bridge linking the main campus to the Isle of Ravens. The island was quiet, shaded with trees. At its center rose an ancient tower of dark gray stone, its walls draped in vines, radiating the weight of centuries. The Ravenry. Quen approached its heavy, green patinated doors and drew out the brass master key. The key slid into the lock with a click, and the bolt gave way. He pushed the door open. Inside was dim and thick with the smell of old paper and dust. The ground floor was large but sparse and untidy, littered with scrolls and books long abandoned. Quen did not linger. He found a narrow spiral stair, just wide enough for one man, and climbed. The Ravenry wasn't tall, perhaps 50 feet. He soon reached the top floor, where a single oak door waited, bound by an ancient lock. The master key turned smoothly, and the door swung open with a groan. A heavier, mustier smell of decay greeted him. It was a low attic, thin light slanting in through small, high windows, shafts of sun illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. At its center stood a single massive oak bookshelf, draped in cobwebs. The shelves held only a few scattered books and scrolls, their condition worse than anything below. Pages curled and yellowed, covers torn, were meaden, all cloaked in thick dust. Quen held his breath and stepped closer, brushing dust aside and turning through the books one by one. Most contained trivial records from the citadel's earliest days, or theories long since disproven. Then his fingertips brushed a thick tome with no cover, its spine bare and rough. He slid it free, blew off the dust, and opened it. With a single glance, his heartbeat quickened. Chapter 72, The Switched Manuscript. The writing on the pages was ancient yet clear, no longer trivial notes but a structured treatise. It began with an exploration of dragon physiology. Next came a detailed analysis of the varying temperatures of dragonflame among different dragons. The book also drew heavily from early Targaryen records of dragon taming, examining the compatibility between dragonriders' personalities and their mounts' temperaments. What truly set Quen's blood racing, however, was the extensive section on the life cycle of dragon eggs, their physiological activity, and how different environments affected their development. It even documented several secret magical experiments during the reign of Jaehaerys I, conducted jointly by the royal court and the citadel, all aimed at reawakening petrified dragon eggs. The text described the preparations in detail, followed by thorough analyses of why each attempt had failed. Quen's gaze shot to the title page, searching for the author's name. But all he found was a scraped patch. The ink stains and torn parchment made it clear, whatever name had once been there had been deliberately and violently erased. Still, Quen had a strong suspicion. Who else but the legendary hand of the king under Jaehaerys I, Barth, famed for his learning and reforms. His most famous, and most lamented, work was that very book later burned on the orders of Baelor the Blessed, Dragons, Worms, and Wyverns, Their Unnatural History. Quen was nearly certain that the nameless tome in his hands was the surviving core of that lost masterpiece. By some twist of fate, it had been hidden away in the dust of the Ravenry Tower's upper chamber, its title and author carefully erased. Could it be that Jachun Hagar, or rather, the House of Black and White behind him, had risked everything to infiltrate the citadel for this? Were they hoping to find within it the means of hatching a dragon egg? A cold light flashed in Quen's eyes. Whatever the faceless men were after, he would never allow this tome of dragon lore to fall into their hands, especially if they truly held a dragon egg. A bold plan took shape in his mind. Without hesitation, he carefully replaced the book, turned, and descended the stairs, returning at once to Marwyn's office. When he shoved the door open, the sulking Marwyn nearly jumped out of his chair. Back already. Found something. Quen gave no explanation, instead asking directly, Archmaester, do you have any books on dragons? Not the printed, widely copied ones. I need raw material, unbound manuscripts, fragments, the more obscure the better. Though suspicious, Marwyn held his tongue at Quen's serious tone. He rose and rummaged through one of his drawers, a cluttered chest of odds and ends. At last he pulled out a bundle of loose papers tied with hemp cord, covered in hurried scrawls. Here. Notes and fragments I picked up years ago during my travels in the East, bits from ruined temples, old peddlers. Plus some of my own speculations. They're a mess, never put into proper order. Take a look. Hey, what are you doing? His words broke off in alarm. Quen had seized a quill, dipped it deep in ink, snatched several blank sheets of parchment, and begun writing in bold, sweeping strokes. Marwyn, fearing for his precious manuscripts, rushed over to see, then stopped, dumbstruck. The pen flew across the page with effortless speed, and the words left him reeling. His eyes bulged as he jabbed a finger at the text, his voice cracking. You mean to say this is true? Quen didn't look up, his hands still moving. Of course it's true, I just made it up. You're not planning to mix this nonsense in with my manuscripts, are you? Marwyn's beard bristled with fury. His scholarly dignity had never felt so insulted. Quen ignored his outrage, filling several more pages. The content grew stranger, even absurd, but written with such authority, citing sources and weaving arguments with a logic that, at least on the surface, held together. After finishing his writing, he dug into the corner of the bookshelf and pulled out several strands of old cotton thread, darkened and yellowed with age, the kind once used to bind manuscripts. With quick, practiced motions, he stitched his freshly written masterpiece, together with Marwyn's scraps, threading them into a crude, coverless book. Archmaester, do you have any way to make these new pages look older? As if they'd been stored for decades, even centuries. Quen held up the freshly forged volume as he asked. Marwyn, though seething with anger, looked at the boy's determined expression, clearly not one to quit until he got his way. And since Marwyn was leaving the citadel behind anyway, why should he care if chaos followed? A mischievous thought crossed his mind. With a disgruntled snort, he went to a shelf crowded with reagent bottles, rummaged a moment, and produced a small beaker filled with a viscous yellow liquid. A smug, wicked grin tugged at his lips. HMPH. You asked the right person. This is one of my special concoctions, perfectly mimics the natural yellowing and brittleness of ancient parchment. Just a little coating and. Before he could finish, Quen had already snatched the beaker. Without hesitation, he poured most of the thick yellow liquid evenly across the freshly bound book. The pages absorbed it quickly, releasing a sharp, acrid stench, sulfur mixed with rotting vegetation. Before their eyes, the edges of the parchment began to yellow and darken, sprouting stains like mold and watermarks. The corners curled slightly, giving the book the appearance of having aged decades in moments. You reckless brat. My reagent. Marwyn cried out in anguish. Quen carefully lifted the foul-smelling, now convincingly aged, book, then flashed him a reassuring grin. Don't worry. I'll be back soon, and I'll return with something even better. Before Marwyn could respond, he whirled around and bolted out of the office like a gust of wind. Marwyn stared at the open doorway, then at the residue of yellow liquid in the empty beaker left behind. A powerful sense of dread crept into his chest. What in the seven hells is that boy up to? Quen raced back to the top of the Ravenry Tower. He quickly located Barth's true manuscript, eased it from its place, and tucked it safely into his chest. Then he pulled out the freshly aged fake, still reeking of chemicals. He brushed away the dust where Barth's book had lain and set the forgery down in its place with exacting care. To complete the illusion, he grabbed a handful of dust from nearby and sprinkled it evenly across the counterfeit and its neighbors. The attic now looked untouched, as if nothing had been disturbed. With the priceless original secure against his chest, Quen slipped back into Marwyn's office like a ghost. When Marwyn saw him draw forth another tome, this one far older looking, its edges frayed, binding nearly falling apart, his eyes bulged like copper bells, and his jaw dropped wide enough to swallow an egg. What in the gods' name did you just do? This is. The aura of true antiquity radiating from the book left no doubt. This was no mere bundle of scattered notes, but a treasury-level relic of the Citadel. Quen placed Barth's work gently on the desk, a sly smile flickering across his lips. Nothing much. Just swapped the manuscript you gave me, plus my own masterpiece, with a certain book from the top shelf of the Ravenry Tower. You stole a forbidden tome from the Citadel. Marwyn's voice cracked as he jabbed a trembling finger at him. Quen only shrugged. So what if they find out? What's it to me? By then we'll be safe in the stepstones. And if they don't notice? He drew out the words deliberately, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Well, then things get interesting. Especially for a certain someone who risked everything to steal that secret manual, only to follow its instructions. Marwyn felt a chill run down his withered legs as he remembered the absurd ritual Quen had jotted at the end of the fake tome, about sacrificing one's manhood to hatch a dragon. He could already picture some poor fool clutching that ancient treasure, with reverence, only to go pale as they read through its earth-shattering incubation rites. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 50 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com/BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 73. Departure. The next morning, as the first light crept across the horizon, Oldtown still lay shrouded in a thinning mist. The air was heavy with the damp breath of the honeywine and the faint smoke rising from cook fires in the morning market. Archmaester Marwyn trudged behind Quen and Janice, dragging his battered leather trunk crammed with strange trinkets and curiosities. When their small boat slipped free of the harbor and out into the wide, blue expanse of whispering sound, Quen stood at the bow. The salt wind whipped against his face, and at last the corners of his lips curved into a faint, relieved smile. His venture to Oldtown had yielded far more than he had dared to expect. Marwyn leaned against the rail, staring past the glittering waves at the shrinking white silhouette of Oldtown's great beacon, the high tower. The flame at its pinnacle seemed less blinding in the morning light, yet it burned as stubbornly as ever. Quen stepped up beside him, following his gaze. Wreathed in dawn's haze, the towering spire looked at once sacred and faintly sinister. That lord of Oldtown. Quen broke the silence. Shut away in that tower for more than 10 years with his so-called mad daughter, what is it they've been studying all this time? Marwyn shook his head slowly, eyes never leaving the tower. 10 years, and not once have they set foot beyond those walls. Only rumors drift through the streets, that they practice magic up there. He paused, frowning. But what kind? No one knows. The tower is too high, too sealed off. Its secrets are buried too deep. Quen's gaze lingered on the burning flame at the tower's peak, his thoughts running dark and quick. Meanwhile, in the depths of the citadel, a raven with glossy black wings fluttered down onto a cluttered writing desk. A young assistant maester hurried over, deftly untying the slim tube fastened to the bird's leg and drawing out the tightly rolled parchment within. He unrolled the message, but after only a few lines, the color drained from his face, leaving behind naked disbelief and fear. Quickly, report to the seneschal. He snapped his head up, calling to the other apprentices hunched over their work. Urgent dispatch from King's Landing. That eastern sorcerer on the stepstones has utterly crushed the pirate Lord Salad Horsan. The letter says he commands an army of the dead. Grand Maester Pycelle demands the Citadel send at once a maester versed in necromancy to King's Landing. They need a way to counter the sorcerer's legion of corpses. The 7-day voyage passed quietly. When the ship finally slipped back into the familiar waters of Bloodstone and moored at Prince's Harbor, Quen stepped ashore with Qyburn at his side. Janis and Marwyn remained aboard, continuing on toward Torturer's Deep to study the secrets hidden within the ruins of Blackstone. Quen settled Qyburn in the depths of the fortress, setting aside several spacious and secure stone chambers, far removed from the bustle, for his use. Keeping Qyburn on Bloodstone rather than sending him to Torturer's Deep was no accident. The dungeons of Bloodstone still held many pirates fiercely loyal to Saladhor, hard-bitten men who would rather die than bend the knee. They would serve as the most direct source of material for Qyburn's studies. In a hastily arranged but well-equipped laboratory, Quen caught the unmistakable gleam of excitement in the maester's gentle blue eyes and posed his first question. Maester Qyburn, what do you believe is the true essence of the force that makes corpses move again? What allows a lifeless shell to rise to its feet? At that, Qyburn's usual mild smile faded, replaced by a sharp, almost fanatical focus. He fell silent for a moment, then spoke in the measured tones of a scholar. My lord, based on some ideas and experiments I pursued at the Citadel, one's not much favored by the mainstream, I believe the key lies in the soul. When a man dies, the soul does not vanish instantly. Like embers, it clings briefly to the corpse. But with time those embers cool, drift away, and finally dissolve into nothing. This is the natural course of life's end, and the reason a corpse ultimately rots. Quen pressed, intrigued. Then how might one stabilize those fading embers of the soul, even bend them to reanimate a body that has lost all life? That is an immensely complex and forbidden problem, my lord. A light flared in Qyburn's eyes, his words tumbling faster. From what I know, certain ancient and potent magics combine those fleeting fragments of the soul, delaying or even halting their dispersal. In that way, the body can be sustained in a peculiar, active state, like a puppet on strings, able to carry out simple commands. He hesitated, then added, but this remains only a theory. The exact rites, the energy required, and the stability of the binding are tremendous challenges. Quen smiled knowingly, but said nothing. He simply clapped his hands once. The heavy wooden door of the laboratory swung open without a sound. A figure clad in Valyrian armor stepped inside. Under Qyburn's stunned gaze, the corpse, once a pirate of Torturer's Deep, now turned into a dragon soul guard, moved stiffly but with perfect obedience. It stripped off its armor and garments, then lay flat on the great stone table in the center of the room, like a specimen awaiting dissection. The chill of the stone beneath its body mirrored the icy pallor of its skin, radiating a sense of eerie inhumanity. Maester Qyburn, Quen said evenly, this is a corpse reanimated through magic. We call them dragon soul guards. It is yours now, for study. The smile froze on Qyburn's face, giving way to a look of rapture, verging on madness. He rushed to the table, his wrinkled hands trembling as he stroked the guard's cold, unyielding flesh. He pressed against dead muscles, tested the joints, probing with the fascination of a man handling a wonder. A rough gasp broke from his throat. This is a miracle, this magic is beyond belief, my lord. His voice rasped with excitement, his blue eyes blazing with the fire of insatiable curiosity. Quen watched him calmly and asked, so then, Maester Qyburn, could you, with your knowledge and skill, recreate this magic? Qyburn snapped his head up, eyes tearing from the corpse. He nodded fiercely, his voice steadier and more fervent than ever. My lord, give me time, and I swear, I will not disappoint you. Quen felt his thoughts settle. Qyburn's response confirmed his judgment. This so-called madman, cast out of the Citadel, truly possessed the gift of reaching across the boundary between life and death. If he mastered this necromantic art, then the forging of an army of tireless, deathless soldiers would no longer be fantasy. Even the others beyond the wall might have cause to falter. Pleased, Quen left the corpse-stinking laboratory. Outside, Roro and Hal were waiting. Roro stepped up at once, lowering his voice with a mix of pride and caution. My lord, while you were away, I followed your orders and took Esser Jorah to the black market at Spearhandle Village. He did indeed reconnect with those men. Spearhandle Village, on Broken Spear Isle, was one of only 2 places in the Stepstones not yet under Quen's control, the other being Tyrosh itself. Both stood isolated in the archipelago's northeast corner, bordering the Myrish Sea, their positions highly sensitive. Quen was not surprised. From the start, when he first sent Roro with Jorah to Spearhandle village, he had known the disgraced Lord of Bear Island would use the chance to reach out to Varys, the Spider, Master of Whisperers in King's Landing. It was almost certainly Jorah's only hope of regaining his freedom, and Linus. By sending him back again, Quen had ensured that the carefully chosen fragments of intelligence he wished to leak would reach the Iron Throne. He could picture the report already, Jorah painting him as a dire threat, warning of an undead host, all in the hope of earning Robert's pardon and spurring the Seven Kingdoms to crush the Stepstones and deliver Linus. Well done. Quen acknowledged Roro's work, then shifted the subject. And the intelligence network I tasked you to lay across the Seven Kingdoms, how fares it? Chapter 74. Mazo's Intelligence Review Campaign. Roro scratched his head awkwardly. My lord, I handed that task to one of my men. He's much better at it than I am, his connections are unconventional. Oh. And who might that be? Quen raised a brow. Do you remember Mazo Mar? Salador's round-faced eunuch. Roro explained, he used to follow Salador and knew all sorts, smugglers, bandit chiefs, merchants, his network is vast. I put him in charge of it, and truth be told, he's been getting results. A flicker of approval passed through Quen's eyes. For a brute like Roro to spot and use talent was an unexpected surprise. He immediately had Mazo Mar summoned. The former confidant of Salador now stood before Quen with exaggerated deference, and a faint trace of fear. His plump face was creased in a humble smile, his posture slightly bowed. My lord, you sent for me. Mazo, any fresh word from King's Landing? Quen asked without preamble. Mazo cleared his throat, then reported in an orderly manner. My lord, I've bought the loyalty of several informants in King's Landing and Dragonstone. At present, there's no sign of major movement in the royal fleet itself. However, according to the deployment our men uncovered. He paused, his expression turning oddly strained. The royal fleet is officially listed at 210 ships. Of those, only 50 remain stationed at King's Landing. The other 160 are all anchored at Dragonstone. And among those 210, just 80 are true Ord warships. The rest are sailing transports. Worse still, those 80 warships are said to be so poorly maintained, most can't even put to sea. His tone carried open disbelief at the state of the Iron Throne's navy. Quen rubbed his chin unconsciously. So the royal fleet had fallen into such a sorry state. The ratio of warships so low, and even those barely seaworthy. He looked back at Mazo. And where has the Iron Throne been focusing its energy of late? A small smile touched Mazo's lips. According to our source among the Antler men, His Grace has grown quite taken with a grand tourney soon to be held at Duskendale. He's announced he will attend in person. Because of this, the Hand and the Master of Coin are in a frenzy, scrambling to raise the funds to cover the enormous costs of the King's progress. The Antler men, wealthy merchants of King's Landing, were often privy to whispers from within the Red Keep. Quen let out a dry laugh. No wonder. With Robert pouring the treasury into his pleasures, how could there be coin left to keep warships afloat? He pressed further. So, in the short term, they're not planning to march against the Stepstones. Mazo shook his head cautiously. Not necessarily, my lord. The Hand of the King, Lord John Arryn, has been convening frequent councils in King's Landing. One of the chief topics is the situation in the Stepstones after Salador's fall, and how the Iron Throne should respond. It's said the Hand has taken a firm line, he believes your expansion must be checked. He even had Pycelle petition the Citadel for expertise in necromancy, specifically to devise a counter against your so-called army of the dead. A glint flashed in Quen's eyes. So, the word had already reached the top of King's Landing. Fortunately, he had acted first, luring Qyburn to his side. Leaking knowledge of the Dragon Soul Guards was meant to spark panic at the Iron Throne, enough to drive them to act rashly and sail their fleet straight into his hands. Anything else? Yes, my lord, Mazo continued. The Hand has also summoned Lord Redwyn of the Arbor to King's Landing. They appear to be discussing countermeasures. Quen's tone turned amused. With the royal fleet a wreck, they're banking on the Arbor fleet. And what of Balon Greyjoy? Did they not fear he'll seize the moment? Mazo reasoned, my lord, compared to Balon's possible raids, the Iron Throne clearly fears far more the prospect of you seizing the narrow sea. That passage carries the bulk of trade between the Seven Kingdoms and the Free Cities. Should you choke it off entirely, their customs revenues will collapse, and the nobles will lose their flow of luxuries. The impact would be devastating. Thus, they would rather risk the Ironborn for now and strike at you first. Quen nodded. That was exactly what he had hoped for. The Iron Throne's logic was falling neatly into place. If they gathered their fleets and sailed to war, he would finally have the chance to play the trump card he had carried since leaving the ruins of Valyria, one decisive blow to wipe out the naval strength of the Seven Kingdoms. His magic was limited, he could not hunt down their fleets piecemeal. But if they came together, he could annihilate them all at once. And once both the royal fleet and the Arbor's main strength were gone, Westeros would be stripped of any chance to rebuild a navy for years. Shipbuilding was no peasant's craft, it demanded skilled shipwrights, rich timber reserves, and immense gold. Even Bravos, famed across the world for its shipyards, could not launch ships like loaves from an oven. At most, they built one warship per day. Quen had gathered 400 to 500 seasoned shipwrights taken from Salidhor and Tyrosh and managed to repair more than 100 warships. Yet even now, they had not produced a single new vessel. He knew well how hard it was to raise a navy from nothing. And with the Iron Throne drowning in debt, once its fleets were broken, it would not rise again for years. Years, enough for him to accomplish much. The strength of House Redwyn is indeed formidable. Mazo added smoothly, according to reliable reports, they command 200 purpose-built Ord warships, and 5 times that number in merchant galleys, altogether a fleet of more than 1,200 vessels. Even though Quen had braced himself, the sheer wealth behind such numbers left him momentarily astonished. The Arbor's wine truly did flow with gold. But he quickly steadied himself. The Redwyns can't possibly commit their entire fleet. Most of their merchants are out on distant trade runs, keeping their lifeblood flowing. At most, they'll bring those 200 warships. Just so, my lord. Mazo nodded. Their merchant ships are scattered across countless routes. They cannot be gathered quickly for war. Good. Quen's tone carried approval. Expand your web further. Every major port in the Seven Kingdoms, Tyrosh, Lee, even Pentos and Volantis, I want them all covered. Whatever it costs in golden dragons, Bloodstone's coffers will pay. I want to know every move, every whisper. As you command, my lord. Mazo bowed deeply, and in his eyes gleamed the thrill of a man newly trusted with real power. Quen turned on Roro and Hal, his voice hard as iron. You too. Drive the work on Salidor's captured ships at full pace. At the same time, keep our own fleet in top condition. I want every vessel ready for battle at a moment's notice. Yes, my lord. The two answered in unison. Quen paced to the heavy stone window, gazing out at the endless blue sweep of the narrow sea. Since walking free of cursed Valyria, he had barely drawn on his true magic, apart from the dragonbone bow, building his hold over the stepstones one step at a time. Not because he lacked the will, but because his magic was as precious as a desert spring. He would not waste a drop on pirates. But this time would be different. If the fleets of the Seven Kingdoms truly dared to sail against him, then he would make them feel for themselves the fury of a true dragon. Chapter 75. Alliance. Time slipped by quietly amidst the tense preparations for war. Since Salidor's beheading, the stepstones looked calm on the surface, but beneath the still waters, fierce currents churned. The shipyards of Bloodstone, Jawbreak Isle, and Torturer's Deep rang day and night with the clamor of hammers and saws, the air heavy with the pungent reek of tung oil. Each day, several repaired warships returned to service, swelling the fleet's ranks. On this day, the silence finally broke. Roro and Hal all but kicked open Quen's study door, their faces burning with outrage. Lord, trouble. Spearhandle village has seized 3 of our grain ships. The Tyroshi, they've struck. In the hall, Jelena and Chai Yi had hurried back from Torturer's Deep upon hearing the news and now stood present. Jelena wore full battle armor, her long hair bound behind her. Chai Yi stood silently at her side. At the report, Quen did not rage, he laughed, like a hunter who had waited patiently for his prey to stumble into the snare. So, they couldn't restrain themselves any longer. Good. Since the Tyroshi were the first to tear off their mask, they cannot fault us for showing no mercy. He rose, his voice sharp as unsheathed steel. Jelena. Here. The knight stepped forward, her voice ringing firm and strong. I order you to take the fleet at once against Broken Spear Isle. Drive every last Tyroshi cur squatting there into the sea to feed the fish. His command was absolute. At once. Jelena's eyes blazed with battle fire as she accepted without hesitation. Then Quen's gaze turned to Roro and Hal, his words heavy with killing intent. Roro. Hal. Carry my orders. From this moment, the waters of the stepstones are under total blockade. From Bloodstone to Grey Gallows to Torturer's Deep, every major channel, every hidden passage, patrolled day and night. Any merchant flying the Tyroshi banner, attack without warning. All seized goods and ships, half divided among the fighting brothers, half turned over to the treasury. Half. Roro's eyes gleamed instantly, greed and excitement almost spilling out. Rest easy, Lord. I swear not a single Tyroshi vessel will slip through our blockade. Plunder, this was the hunger bred into every pirate's bones. Hal said nothing, but the iron hook he bore glinted coldly in the candlelight, and a cruel smile tugged at his lips. Since Quen had seized the stepstones, he had forbidden large-scale raiding, demanding only tolls to keep the trade lanes steady and avoid needless enemies. These hardened pirates had long itched for blood. Now, with war against Tyrosh upon them, their instincts at last could be unleashed. Meanwhile, on the Isle of Tyrosh, within the Grand Lord's palace, Petter Baelish, envoy from King's Landing, was taking in the famed splendor of the Tyroshi lord's seat with evident interest. Pearls and mother of pearl inlaid into the stone walls shimmered with dreamlike brilliance under the lamps. Gold and colored glass formed intricate patterns, and the air was thick with exotic spices. His gray-green eyes seemed to admire it all like those of a dazzled traveler, yet deep within them lay only a cold, calculating gleam. Great and noble Archon. Littlefinger turned around, his face brimming with sincere admiration, utterly devoid of any pretense. The splendor and exquisite craftsmanship of your palace are truly unparalleled in the world. When I first stepped into this hall of glory, its dazzling radiance nearly made me believe I had stumbled into the paradise of the gods. Revelry. His flattery was perfectly measured, neither excessively obsequious nor overly indulgent of his host's vanity. Perched upon a throne inlaid with ivory and jewels, the Bluebeard Archon sat like a giant barrel stuffed with cushions, his massive frame sunk deep into the seat. His fat fingers roamed unabashedly over the voluptuous, scantily clad paramour beside him, eliciting exaggerated sighs of pleasure. At Littlefinger's flattery, a smug grin spread across his face, thick blue beard framing it. He opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off by a cold voice beside him. Lord Barrack. The green-bearded man seated below the Archon's throne spoke with icy impatience, spare me the flattery. As an envoy of the Seven Kingdoms royal house, you crossed the narrow sea to Tyrosh. Surely your purpose extends beyond admiring our palace. State your business. A flicker of sharpness passed through Petter Baelish's eyes. His smile remained unchanged as he turned to the green-bearded man, his tone shifting to one of solemn concern. My lord, I come at the behest of King Robert Baratheon and Lord Jon Arryn, Lord Paramount, bearing the Iron Throne's most sincere goodwill. We seek an alliance with mighty Tyrosh to mount a joint campaign against the eastern sorcerers who have made their nest in the Stepstones, becoming a grave threat to our very heartland. An alliance. To eliminate a mere pirate chieftain. Greenbeard emitted a short, contemptuous snort. Our Tyrosh fleet dominates the narrow sea, invincible in every campaign. To deal with a single pirate, must we join forces with your seven kingdoms and share the spoils? His words brimmed with suspicion toward the Iron Throne's ambitions to lay claim to the Stepstones. Littlefinger's smile remained flawless, as if oblivious to the sarcasm. Lord, perhaps your knowledge of this, pirate chieftain, is insufficient. According to our confirmed intelligence, that eastern sorcerer commands a truly terrifying army, a legion of genuine, magically reanimated corpses. They wear indestructible Valyrian steel armor, wield Valyrian steel weapons that cleave through iron like butter, know no fatigue, fear no death, and possess combat prowess far surpassing ordinary soldiers. Greenbeard's scorn froze on his face, his pupils tightening slightly as the shocking revelation visibly unsettled him. Yet he quickly regained his composure, forcing skepticism through gritted teeth. On the water, Valyria holds none of its land-based advantages. As for your so-called Legion of the Dead, HMPH. Utter nonsense. Only a fool would believe such ghost stories. Littlefinger remained unflappable, now offering a more compelling proposition. Lord, the Iron Throne seeks alliance not for the lands of the Stepstones, but out of concern that if this sorcerer grows unchecked, he may become a second, Ninnapenny Kings, or even more dangerous. Moreover, we have a crucial mole within the sorcerer's inner circle. All intelligence regarding the necromantic legions and the Valyria weapons was risked at great personal peril by this informant. Lord, what if this intelligence proves accurate? Can Tyrosh alone withstand an undead Valyria legion? And what of? He shifted his tone. After the fall of Saladhor, have the Lysan not set their sights on the Stepstones? Might they too be secretly gathering strength, waiting to reap the spoils? The words, Lysan, struck Greenbeard like a sledgehammer. The rivalry between Tyrosh and Lee over the stepstones ran deep, an inescapable enmity. Littlefinger had pinpointed Tyrosh's greatest external threat. Greenbeard's face darkened completely. His brow furrowed as he fell into a prolonged silence. He weighed the pros and cons, envisioning the horror of battling an undead army and the Lysan's potential opportunistic invasion. Finally, he lifted his head, his gaze hardening with resolve. Turning to the Bluebeard Archon still needing his paramour upon the throne, he declared in a deep voice. Archon, I believe it is in Tyrosh's interests to collaborate with the Iron Throne. We should jointly deploy forces to pacify the Stepstones and eliminate that Eastern sorcerer. Great and noble Archon. Littlefinger turned, his face glowing with earnest admiration, not a hint of insincerity showing. The splendor and craftsmanship of your palace are unmatched in all the world. When I first stepped into this hall of glory, its brilliance nearly made me think I had wandered into the gods' own feast. His flattery was perfectly measured, enough to please, but not so much as to reek of servility. Upon a throne inlaid with ivory and gems sprawled the Bluebeard Archon, his massive frame sinking deep into the cushions like a barrel overstuffed with cloth. His thick fingers wandered shamelessly over the curves of a scantily dressed mistress at his side, drawing from her a chorus of exaggerated moans. At Littlefinger's praise, a smug grin spread beneath his dense blue beard. He was about to speak when a cold voice cut him off. Lord Baelish. The green-bearded man seated below the Archon's throne spoke with icy impatience. Spare us the flattery. You crossed the narrow sea as envoy of the Seven Kingdoms, surely not merely to admire our palace. State your purpose. A glimmer of sharpness flickered in Petyr Baelish's eyes. His smile did not falter. Turning to Greenbeard, his tone shifted to one of solemn gravity. My lord, I come at the command of King Robert Baratheon and his hand, Lord Jon Arryn. I bear the Iron Throne's most sincere goodwill. We seek alliance with mighty Tyrosh, to join forces in eradicating the Eastern sorcerer entrenched in the Stepstones, a growing danger at the very heart of the realm. Alliance. To put down a mere pirate. Greenbeard let out a short, scornful laugh. The fleets of Tyrosh rule the narrow sea, undefeated. To deal with one pirate, must we share the spoils with your seven kingdoms? His words dripped with suspicion, wary of the Iron Throne's designs on the Stepstones. Littlefinger's smile remained as flawless as ever, as though he had not noticed the scorn. My lord, perhaps your knowledge of this so-called pirate is incomplete. From our confirmed intelligence, this Eastern sorcerer commands a fearsome host, a legion of corpses, truly reanimated by sorcery. They are clad in unyielding Valyrian armor, wield Valyrian steel that cuts through iron as if it were butter. They do not tire, they do not fear death, and their strength in battle far surpasses that of mortal men. The disdain on Greenbeard's face froze. His pupils contracted ever so slightly, betrayed by the shock of such a revelation. But he forced his composure, clinging to skepticism. At sea, Valyrian steel holds no advantage as it might on land. And this nonsense of an army of corpses, ha! Only a fool would believe such tales. Littlefinger's expression did not waver. He pressed on, sweetening the lure. My lord, the Iron Throne seeks no land in the Stepstones. Our concern is that, unchecked, this sorcerer may rise to become another Ninnepenny king, or worse. And know this, we have placed within his ranks a most crucial agent. The reports of necromantic legions, of Valyrian weapons, all come from this man, who risked his very life to pass them on. So I ask you, what if these reports are true? Can Tyrosh alone stand against an undead Valyrian host? And more than that, his tone sharpened. Since the fall of Saladhor, do you not think the Lyseni have cast covetous eyes on the Stepstones? Do you not think they too gather strength in secret, waiting for their moment to strike? The name, Lyseni, landed like a hammer blow on Greenbeard's heart. The struggle between Tyrosh and Lee over the Stepstones was ancient, an enmity that could never be ignored. Littlefinger had touched the rawest nerve. Greenbeard's expression darkened, his brows drawn tight. Silence stretched as he weighed the horrors of facing an army of the dead against the threat of Lee seizing the spoils. At last, he lifted his head. His eyes held the weight of decision. Turning to the Bluebeard Archon, still pawing at his mistress on the throne, he said in a deep, deliberate voice. Archon, I believe it is in Tyrosh's interest to ally with the Iron Throne. Together we must strike the Stepstones and rid ourselves of this Eastern sorcerer. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 76, The Fall of Spearhandle Village. At Quen's command, Jelena led 5,000 well-drilled pirates in leather armor and 400 dragon soul guards in Valyrian steel onto 20 Ord warships. The blades of the oars bit into the leaden-gray sea, driving the ships forward as they surged toward Broken Spear Isle. The jagged shoreline of the isle loomed through the morning mist. Without meeting resistance, the warships ground roughly onto the pebble shoals outside Spearhandle village. The pirates poured over the gunwales like sharks scenting blood, shouting and shoving one another, heedless of the cold saltwater that reached their knees. Jelena was the first ashore, her stride steady, her cloak snapping in the damp sea wind. Spearhandle village was caught completely unawares. The Tyrosh garrison numbered no more than 400 or 500, most still lost in the haze of wine or a whore's embrace from the night before. The blare of horns, the pirates' savage roars, and the clash of steel tore them from their stupor. A few half-dressed soldiers stumbled from barracks and watchtowers, clutching rusted spears that shook in their hands. The fight erupted in a heartbeat and ended even quicker. The Dragon Soul Guards advanced like a tide, cutting down scattered pockets of resistance with chilling efficiency. Their movements were precise, pitiless. Valyrian steel blades traced arcs of death in the morning light, every stroke punctuated by the crunch of bone or the choking gasp of the dying. The pirates were beasts unchained, storming the village's narrow lanes and low houses, battering doors open with fists and the flats of their blades, dragging panicked soldiers from their beds. Cries, curses, and desperate pleas tangled with the screech of steel, shattering the village's fragile calm. At the entrance stood Jelena, her gaze hard as ice, surveying the chaos. She watched a Tyrosh officer attempt to rally his men. He barely lifted his sword before a Dragon Soul Guard's blade punched through his throat, his blood spattering the mud. Surrender. Drop your weapons. The pirates, shouts rang out in every corner. Those Tyrosh who lived, paralyzed by fear, flung down their weapons, raised their hands, and sank to their knees. The few who fled toward the harbor or the woods were swiftly felled by arrows and axes, collapsing with strangled cries. Within the hour, all was decided. The air hung thick with blood and brine. Hundreds of Tyrosh captives, faces ashen, were strung together with ropes like livestock bound for slaughter. Spearhandle village, this smuggler's nest turned black market hub, was stripped bare. Warehouses filled with silk and spice, storehouses crammed with grain and casks of wine, even the soldiers, owned stashes of gold dragons and silver stags, none were spared. Jelena looked over the prisoners and the spoils, her violet eyes as calm and unyielding as stone. Her first order was crisp and cold: bind the captives tight. Put them on the ships. Send them back to the dungeons of Bloodstone. Then her gaze cut to the black market traders peering nervously from the shadows, their eyes darting. She raised her voice for all to hear. Spearhandle village is ours now. At dawn on the fourth day, Quen led 300 Dragon Soul Guards ashore onto the cobbled beach of Spearhandle. By then, Jelena had already sent the prisoners back to Bloodstone and set her men to reorganizing the black market. Order returned with startling speed. The smuggler's den, once chaotic, thrummed with life again under her firm hand. The black market of Spearhandle was built for smugglers, its stalls overflowing with contraband. Furs and timber from the north, Dornish red wine, Myrish blankets, goods from every corner of the world lay in dazzling heaps. With no tacksman to bleed them, the wares sold cheap. Quen stepped into Jelena's temporary command post, a stone hut reeking of sea salt and dust. Lord. Jelena's voice was steady. He nodded and looked to her. Any movement from Tyrosh? Her violet eyes narrowed. Patrol ships report dead silence around the main island. Only merchant sails in the harbor, no sign of warships gathering. Quen frowned. We're striking right at their doorstep, yet the Tyroshi remain so patient. He had expected their fleet to swarm out like a disturbed hornet's nest. Instead, this silence was more unnerving than the beating of war drums. What were these arrogant Tyroshi plotting? No. A sharp thought pierced his mind. The Tyroshi had likely already struck a bargain with the Seven Kingdoms. Jon Arryn, that old falcon of the Vale, was a master strategist. He would never act rashly without first testing his enemy's strength. Gathering armies, moving supplies, readying ships, each required time. He would surely use that interval to court others on the far end of the stepstones who also stood opposed to Quen. Tyrosh and Lee. But Tyrosh and Lee had been at odds for decades over trade disputes. For them to reconcile and march together against him would be difficult. That made it far more likely Jon Arryn had dispatched envoys to Tyrosh. Tyrosh, being closest to the stepstones, had the most urgent reason to crush him, and its merchants depended far more heavily than Lee on the trade routes that passed through these seas. A joint pact between the Seven Kingdoms and Tyrosh was the most probable outcome. And if so, it was exactly what Quen wanted. His voice rang with certainty. Jelena, hold broken spear Isle. Make a show of strength, enough for Tyrosh to believe we've stationed our main force here. A flicker of confusion crossed her violet eyes, but she said nothing, answering simply, as you command, my lord. After giving his orders, Quen returned to Bloodstone. No sooner had he arrived than Roro, Hal, and Mazo came before him. Mazo stepped forward, speaking calmly. Lord, word from the Antler men in King's Landing. The Hand has dispatched Petter Baelish, the master of Quen, to Tyrosh for secret negotiations with the Archon. As expected, Quen thought. He nodded, his face unreadable. How far along are preparations in the Seven Kingdoms? Mazo continued, the realm is already in war mobilization. The king has just returned to King's Landing from the tournament at Duskendale. At the feast, he declared his intent to pacify the Stepstones, just as he did with House Targaryen and the Iron Islands. Let him come. He had better come. I can't think of anything more worth boasting of than capturing the king of the Seven Kingdoms. Roro spat, his eyes burning with old hatred. Quen's gaze sharpened. And their fleet. How stands the muster? How many men? Mazo rattled it off without hesitation. The Redwyne fleet is ready to sail. The royal fleet is under repair. And word is, the Hand has compelled the Iron Islands to contribute, 30 longships are being sent to war. Quen frowned. And why would the Ironborn obey so easily? Mazo explained, the Hand wrote threatening Balin directly. This war will see Lord Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, bring with him his ward, Theon Greyjoy, to King's Landing. Quen paused. He had nearly forgotten the little kraken. Balin might bluster, but with his son held hostage, he dared not defy the Iron Throne now. Not that it mattered much. Any ship could burn. Any man thrown into the sea lost his strength to fight. Watching Quen's pensive expression, Mazo went on. As for troop numbers, those are harder to confirm. Several versions of the report are circulating in King's Landing. But overall, the Hand has called, in the king's name, upon the wardens of the Four Quarters, as well as the lords of Dorne, the Stormlands, and the Riverlands. How these lords will actually respond to this war, however, that remains to be seen. Quen was pleased. Truth be told, Mazo Mar's skill at gathering intelligence had far exceeded his expectations. The man's thinking was sharp too, embedding informants among the wealthy antler men of King's Landing. Those merchants loved nothing more than gossiping about Red Keep affairs, especially talk of war. After all, war struck directly at their purses. Still, unlike Quen, they knew little of the true intrigues between the great houses of Westeros. From his vantage, the lords might answer the call, but they would not commit their full strength. For he knew well how many ambitious souls lurked in that land of sunset. Indeed, many would likely see this campaign in the Stepstones as a chance to break the fragile balance of power in the Seven Kingdoms and sow the seeds of chaos to come. Quen had no intention of being anyone's pawn. This war would be his chance to lay the groundwork for his own bid for dominion over Westeros. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 77. Choice of Commander Bonus Review Campaign. King's Landing, the Red Keep, the small council chamber. The tall, fat king of the Seven Kingdoms, Robert Baratheon, sat on the Iron Throne, arguing with the small council about the war that looked set to break out. Robert Baratheon's huge frame sank into the throne, his face flushed with drink. His thick black beard trembled with every oath. Those damned iron whores spawn 30 ships. And I'm supposed to outfit them with swords and spears. If I'd known, I should have had Balin and his stinking sons' heads put on pikes battlements years ago. Lord John Arryn, the Hand of the King, rubbed his temples wearily. Your Grace, we actually have enough ships. The royal fleet is working round the clock to repair the warships, and Lord Redwyne's fleet is ready. We can muster at least 400 warships. But the real problem isn't that. John Arryn paused, looked around at the other lords seated before him, and said solemnly, we must consider the cost of this campaign. This time. At the word, cost, Robert's jowls quivered like a rattle. 7 hells, John, don't talk to me about money. I know, you'll sort it out. Maybe you'll send men to the Iron Bank across the narrow sea, or go beg Lord Tywin at Castle Rock. By the 7, Tywin's shit's made of gold, you could flog the crown's debts to the High Septon. Anyway, I trust you, John. You'll find a way. Bitter memories rose in John Arryn's chest as he thought back to the days in the Vale. Back then Robert had been tall and handsome, his eyes bright, half the kingdom's maiden's dream. Now Robert was lost in drink and women, his step unsteady, neglecting the realm's business and shirking the duties a king should keep. He had overthrown a mad king only to place a drunken one on the throne. Robert left the court to brothels and hunts, the work of ruling fell on John's shoulders. As hand, John had to carry the 7 kingdoms. Faced with crushing debts, he had to swallow his pride and beg favors and loans. And every time money was mentioned, Robert's flippant attitude made John feel the burden grow heavier. Your Grace, let us return to the matter at hand. This campaign will likely require you to remain in King's Landing. John cut off the debt talk and steered the conversation. Robert interrupted at once. Hide me away in the castle like a coward. I'd rather die. John frowned. Your Grace, the battlefield is too dangerous. We cannot let you risk yourself. Robert's eyes went wide. I won my place on the battlefield. I smashed Rhaegar Targaryen on the banks of that cursed trident and took the Iron Throne. Now you want me hidden behind others. No, John, you'd make me a laughingstock. John urged, Your Grace, those days were different. Now you are king of the 7 kingdoms. Your safety determines the realm's future. Robert bellowed, No. It's always the same. If a king can't win respect on the battlefield, he can't win it from his vassals. I must go. It's a king's command. John had no words left. Watching Robert's stubborn, bloated face, a thought slid into John's mind. Robert might be a fine warrior, but he's no good king. Putting him on the Iron Throne could have been a mistake. John dismissed the chilling idea and stopped arguing. Your Grace, if you insist on leading the campaign, at least have the vanguard land first. Sea battles differ from land. Once you're in the water, no armor, no matter how strong, will save you. Robert snorted and seemed to agree. Either way, I'll smash that Eastern sorcerer's skull. A sorcerer without a head is still a dead sorcerer. With the decision for the king to go set, the question turned to who would command. Robert chose bluntly, bring Ned Stark. He won for me before, he'll win for me again. John sighed inwardly and hastened to answer, Ned may be a fine commander on land, but he's unfit at sea. Wolves don't do well in water. His gaze fell to 2 empty chairs. The king's 2 younger brothers were not in King's Landing. Renly had left half a month ago for Storm's End to muster the Stormlands, vassals. As for Stannis, a few nights before, Stannis had angrily confronted the king at small council about the royal fleet's neglected upkeep, blaming the crown. He left that night for Dragonstone to ready his forces. To rebuild the royal fleet, Jon Arryn had to borrow funds from the Faith to pay for the ship repairs. Pycelle spoke in a trembling voice, perhaps, Great Lord Stannis could take command. He is master of ships, his seat is Dragonstone, and he knows naval warfare. The king roared, No, he shall not command. That bastard Stannis only knows how to oppose me. The memory of his brother's iron-faced scowl sent a hot, unnameable rage through Robert. John replied patiently, Your Grace, Lord Stannis is the best choice, unless we want to put an Iron Captain of the Iron Fleet in charge. Robert turned to the Master of Whisperers, Varys, who had been silent. What of Tywin? Varys, in his slick, silky voice, answered, Your Grace, Lord Tywin has sent his brother, Esser Kevin, to lead the Westerlands host. He remains at Castle Rock. Robert scowled. What's he doing, hiding in a pile of stones? He paused, then looked to John with hopeful eyes. Any other able men in the Vale? John shook his head helplessly, then offered another feasible option. Your Grace, perhaps Lord Redwyn should command. He has the Arbor fleet and knows naval warfare, ideal for an expedition to the Stepstones. He knew Robert would never appoint Stannis, the brothers' feud had become almost overt. As for Renly, he was too young. When Robert rose in rebellion, Renly had still been a boy, untested in war. Counting options, only Paxter Redwyn of the Reach seemed qualified to lead. Though Paxter was a vassal, his strength on the water rivaled that of many great lords. House Tyrell had sent their second son, Garland Tyrell, to the Stepstones campaign, while House Hightower dispatched their heir, Baelor Hightower, along with Morin Tyrell, the former commander of Aldtown's garrison. From that perspective, Lord Redwyn could hold the line, he could serve as commander. Robert considered briefly, then lifted a silver goblet and gulped. Very well. May Lord Paxter's skill in war be as fine as the golden wine his house brews. He belched with satisfaction. Varys slid in, honeyed as ever. Your Grace, my lords, Esser Jorah writes he will prepare the intelligence for our fleet's landing. He is striving to learn the Eastern sorcerer's future tactics. Once the 7 kingdoms' armies are assembled, an attack from within and without should crush the Eastern sorcerer in a single stroke. Robert wiped wine from his beard and nodded. Tell Jorah that if he brings me useful intelligence, I will pardon him in the king's name. Chapter 78. Farewell to Linus. 2 months slipped away like sand. Bloodstone Isle. Esser Jorah Mormont dragged his weary body from the training grounds, sweat and dust soaking through his coarse tunic. Since Broken Spear Isle had fallen to Lo Quen, many black market traders had begun sailing to Bloodstone Isle to do business. Now, Jorah only needed to make contact with Varys's little birds on the island, which made passing on information far more efficient. But troubling news had reached him. The Seven Kingdoms' armies were nearly ready, and the royal fleet's warships were repaired. The Great War was drawing near. Varys's little birds had pressed him to provide Lo Quen's tactical plans as soon as possible. The demand filled him with dread. How was he supposed to learn Lo Quen's battle strategy? He had never been invited to Lo Quen's war councils. Lo Quen did not trust him, a truth silently accepted by nearly all the high commanders. All Jorah could do was spend his days drilling that unruly, undisciplined band of pirates. Of course, he never believed training pirates would truly trouble the Seven Kingdoms' armies. Even when he didn't slack, even when he drilled them in basic maneuvers and taught them standard battlefield orders, he knew this rabble would never match the elite soldiers of Westeros. The true danger lay with the Dragon Soul Guards, hard and unyielding as steel. But how to uncover real secrets? Storm into the war tent. That was suicide. Bribe a commander. He was penniless, and no one dared betray the Eastern sorcerer. Jorah's brow furrowed as his thick fingers tapped unconsciously against the hilt of the sword at his hip. Jorah. A voice he longed for more than anything reached his ears. Jorah spun around. In the doorway, the setting sun cast its golden glow around a slender, graceful figure. A pale pink silk gown clung to her enticing form. The sea breeze teased her golden hair, a few strands brushing against her smooth neck. It was his Linus. Months had passed since he followed Lo Quen to war. This was the first time he had seen his beloved wife. Longing and love surged through him, driving him forward. He wanted nothing more than to crush her in his arms. But Linus stepped lightly aside, evading him. Jorah, you're covered in dust from the training grounds, and the smell of sweat. Even in exile, the lady of House Hightower kept her natural reserve, her distaste for foul scents. Seeing her cover her mouth and nose, Jorah froze mid-embrace, embarrassment washing over his face. Linus, I just came from training, you don't know how much I've missed you, day and night. In Torturer's Deep, that Eastern man, he hasn't harmed you, has he? His voice was hoarse, heavy with longing and fear. Linus let out a quiet sigh. She lifted her eyes, those once proud, willful blue eyes now carried a maturity Jorah had never seen. He hasn't mistreated me. But Torturer's Deep is a pirate's den with little comfort. No soft beds, no fragrant gardens, no fine silverware, no servants at my beck and call. Only rough stone walls, the salty sea wind, bland food, and guards everywhere. When war drew near, they moved the army of Torturers Deep to Broken Spear Isle, leaving only a few behind. That Eastern man feared I might escape, so he brought me here to Bloodstone instead. Jorah's heart lurched. Lo Quen had shifted the forces of Torturers Deep to Broken Spear Isle as well. What were they planning? An attack on Tyrosh? He narrowed his eyes, silently weighing the chance to escape. Jorah, what's wrong? Linus's voice carried genuine concern. Jorah snapped back, resolve hardening in his gaze. His voice was low and heavy. Linus, I'm thinking about when we'll finally break free of this Eastern sorcerer's grip. I endure this humiliation, drilling that rabble like a beast tamer, breaking my back for him day after day, for one reason only. To protect you. To make him believe you still have value, so he won't dare harm a single hair on your head. I swear it, by the old gods and the new. His fists clenched, knuckles cracking. I will get you out of this hell. Back to Westeros, or anywhere you wish to go. Linus gazed at him silently, something softening in her eyes. Instead of retreating, she stepped forward. Her delicate hands, once meant only for silk and harp strings, reached for his, rough with calluses, damp with sweat, and scarred by training. Her touch was cool and soft, yet carried a strange strength. Your heart is enough, Jorah. Her voice was gentle as the evening breeze, yet every word struck true. In those endless nights in Torturer's Deep, lying on a cold stone bed, I thought of so much. The woman I was, like a spoiled child, selfish, willful, demanding only your love and indulgence. I broke your heart, even drove you to commit an unforgivable mistake, just to satisfy my vanity. A single tear slipped down her smooth cheek, shining as it fell. If the gods truly show us mercy, and the day comes when we win back our freedom, Jorah. Her voice carried a dreamlike yearning as she clasped his hand tighter. I don't want to return to Aldtown, nor to Bear Island. I want to be with you, truly together. We'll sail east, across the Jade Sea to explore Karth, seek the legendary ruins of Yiti, and drink from the ancient well of wisdom in the shadow city of Ashai. We'll see the world, just you and me. Her gaze was clear and resolute, filled with hope for the future and trust in the man before her. Jorah was stunned, as if struck by lightning. The Linus before him was no longer the girl who cared only for jewels, feasts, and vanity. Years and hardship had stripped away her frivolity, leaving behind a quiet, resilient glow, the deep tolerance of a grown woman. That belated, profound love and understanding melted Jorah's long-frozen heart like molten fire. He seized Linus's cool wrist and all but dragged her into the low, dim stone hut. The heavy wooden door slammed shut behind them, shutting out the world. The room was dark. Jorah did not light a lamp. He pulled Linus into the shadowed corner and lowered his voice. Listen, Linus. Listen carefully. You're being brought to Bloodstone, perhaps this is the gods granting us a chance. These months, I haven't only been training pirates. I've been secretly contacting the lords of the small council in King's Landing. I warned them of the Easterners' ambition. Taking the stepstones is only his first step. His true goal is the Iron Throne, Westeros itself. He drew a deep breath, as if binding himself to a long-cherished vow. The small council has promised me that if I can secure the Eastern sorcerer's detailed war plans, if I can prove my worth, the Iron Throne will pardon all my crimes. We'll be free. Truly free. We can go home. Linus's small hand squeezed tighter, her knuckles whitening with emotion. Jorah. Her blue eyes shone in the shadows, bright and unwavering. As long as I'm with you, it doesn't matter where we go, whether it's back to Aldtown to face my father's wrath, to your cold Bear Island, or eastward across the sea to seek the Well of Wisdom, I will follow you. That unreserved, almost martyr-like confession shattered Jorah Mormont's last defenses. She was so young, in the very bloom of life. Once, their marriage had seemed little more than a maiden's infatuation with a knight's glory. But now, the true love shining in her eyes, tempered by hardship, was like pure sunlight, chasing away every shadow of his exile. That late but weighty love nearly drowned the great bear, long used to giving and nursing his wounds, in a flood of happiness he could hardly bear. But fate always bared its fangs at the sweetest moment. Jorah. Linus's voice trembled faintly as she slipped free of his hand. I must go. Go. The tenderness on Jorah's face froze into shock. Linus, you've only just come. That Eastern man. She cut him off, humiliation and fear flickering in her eyes. He forbade me from seeing you, he keeps me in a stone house across the harbor, under guard. I only got here because I begged and begged the watchman, my time is nearly up. A surge of cold fury erupted in Jorah. His face twisted, veins bulged at his temples, and his teeth ground so hard they threatened to shatter. Damn Eastern bastard. He growled, fists trembling with the force of his rage, knuckles turning bone white. He's using you as a hostage, a chain binding me. If not for your safety. His head snapped up, murder blazing in his eyes, his body ready to storm out and face Quen in blood. No. Jorah, no. Please, don't act rashly, don't throw everything away. You've already reached the Iron Throne, you have hope now. You must endure. You must stay calm. Her tear-filled eyes lifted to his, full of pleading. When the Seven Kingdoms armies come, when His Grace's warhammer strikes Bloodstone, that will be the day we are free. Promise me you'll endure. For me, endure. Jorah's chest heaved, his harsh breathing filling the cramped space. He looked at Linus's tear-streaked yet steadfast face, at the fear and plea she forced down for their future. He shut his eyes, drew in a long breath, and when he opened them again, the storm had been replaced by heavy calm. You're right, Linus, you're right. The closer we are to the end, the calmer I must be, the more I must endure. After Linus left, Jorah stood frozen, staring after the light of her figure until it vanished at the street's corner. The sea wind howled through the cracks, carrying a cutting chill. He must get the plans. At any cost, he must save Linus. Chapter 79. The Empty Bloodstone Isle. That night, Bloodstone lay buried in oppressive darkness. The training grounds, noisy by day, were deathly still. Only the endless waves roared and wept among the reefs, like the gods playing a cold, monotonous dirge beneath the moon. Jorah was about to toss restlessly on his crude wooden bed when he heard hesitant, liquor-heavy footsteps outside, followed by a rough knock. Master-at-arms. Master-at-arms Jorah. A slurred voice called out, Lord Roro wants you to come drink. Jorah's heart gave a sudden jolt. Roro. The coarse, hot-tempered former pirate captain, now a trusted commander under Quen. He wanted to drink with him. That had never happened before. A flicker of caution, and an undeniable stir of anticipation, rose within him. He quickly threw on a cleaner tunic and followed the guard, who also stank of drink, through dark, narrow alleys that reeked of fish and rotting waste, until they reached Roro's courtyard. It was far better than his own stone hut, higher walls, and even a small watchtower. Who goes there? Growled the guard in the shadows of the gate, hand on his dagger. Jorah Mormont. His voice was calm, steady. Master-at-arms. Recognizing him by the dim torchlight, the guard straightened at once and saluted with the crisp precision of a sailor. On Bloodstone, his work-drilling pirates had earned Jorah the title of Master-at-arms, not noble, but useful. The guard pushed open the heavy wooden door. Lord Rora waits inside. He gestured toward the main hall, where the strong stench of spirits drifted through the cracks. Jorah stepped in. The hall was lit only by a few tallow candles, their glow flickering faintly. Roro sat alone at a rohewn table, a massive earthen jug before him. The rich, heady aroma of pear brandy from Tyrosh filled the air, sweet, strong, with a sharp fruit note. In the candlelight, Roro's face burned red, his eyes bleary. Spotting Jorah, he split his mouth in a grin, showing crooked yellow teeth, and slapped the bench beside him. Ha! Jorah, the knight of Bear Island himself. His voice was thick with drink, his tongue sluggish. Come, sit. Taste this, Tyroshi pear brandy, the good stuff. Not that sour grape water from Lee. He seized the jug and poured into a chipped clay cup until the amber liquid nearly spilled over. Jorah sat down without protest, his eyes taking in Roro's condition. Unsteady steps, glassy eyes, slurred words, he was deep in his cups. Jorah's nerves eased slightly. He picked up the cup but didn't drink, letting the pungent fumes sting his nose. Good stuff. Roro downed a great gulp himself, smacking his lips in satisfaction, then slapped his huge hand on Jorah's shoulder with such force it made him sway. Sir Jorah, ha! Who'd have thought we'd be drinking together? His breath reeked of spirits as he leaned closer, drunk eyes staring hard. Back then, I was at sea, raided your ship, and you rammed me, you bastard, and what happened? We all got thrown into the stew together, served up to the Lord. Jorah's mouth twisted into the stiffest of smiles. That skirmish, where his and Linus's fate was sealed, was one of the memories he hated most. Truth is, Jorah. Roro took another swig, swaying, but his gaze sharpened with the candor of a drunk. I used to despise you Seven Kingdoms lot. Pretentious bastards. A pack of silk-wrapped cowards. He belched loudly. Until you came. Hells, I hated you too at first. Always stone-faced, like a gargoyle, and you thought you could teach my men to march. Ha! He mimicked Jorah's drill commands in a mocking, sing-song tone. Jorah's weathered face darkened, his fingers tightening around the cup. But, Roro suddenly boomed, slamming Jorah's shoulder again, nearly spilling his drink. I saw you taught for real. You showed the brothers how to live behind their shields, how to strike where it hurts, how to follow orders, not scatter like headless gulls. I was impressed. He jabbed a thick finger at Jorah, his bleary eyes clouded yet strangely earnest. You, Jorah Mormont, you're the first, and only, man of the Seven Kingdoms I, Roro, have ever respected. You've got balls. A storm of emotions churned in Jorah, shame, anger, and bitter irony. He remembered Linus's tearful plea. Endure. He raised the cup and took a long, burning swallow. The fire scorched his throat, smothering the turmoil inside. He set down his cup, his voice deliberately calm, touched with just the right amount of humility. Brother Roro, you give me too much credit. What I taught was nothing more than scraps of battlefield survival. The brothers' courage comes from the Lord's command, from hard battles fought with real steel and blood. I only helped rein in their wild nature a little. War. Yes. War. Roro lit up, his voice suddenly rising with drunken bloodlust, though his words grew more slurred. It's starting again, a big one, a hard one. The brothers, all being sent away. Jorah's heart clenched as if a cold hand had seized it. He forced his breath steady, his face showing just the right mix of puzzlement and the sting of being left out. Sent away. Where? To besiege Tyrosh, isn't it? On the stepstones, that's the last nail sticking out. He asked it casually, but under the table his fingers clenched tight. Roro chuckled, leaning close, his breath a sickening mix of wine and sour food washing over Jorah's face. Dropping his voice, he spoke with the smugness of a man sharing secrets, dulled by drink. Of course. The Lord, he's decided. Emptying the nest, we're gonna rip Tyrosh out by the roots. And Bloodstone. He belched loud enough to rattle the table, his head lolling. Bloodstone's yours, Master-at-Arms Jorah, with 500 brothers, to guard the home, watch the gates. Guard the island. Only 500 left on Bloodstone. Joy exploded in Jorah's chest like fire. This was a gift straight from the gods. His face twitched as he fought to keep a grin from breaking through. Instead, he forced a look of anger and wounded pride, his voice rising with a warrior's dignity. Leave me here to guard the gates. No. Brother Roro, that won't do. Tyrosh is ripe for the taking. The brothers are marching to fight, to win honor and glory, how can I cower in the rear? I'll petition the Lord myself, all. Shish. Roro thrust up a finger, his bleary eyes darting about, though the room was empty save for them. He leaned in, his voice dropping lower still, thick with drunken secrecy. Don't shout. This was, Council's orders. Every man fit to fight, gather at Broken Spear Isle, to strike fucking Tyrosh. You, stay behind, guard the home. He paused, a flicker of wary clarity glinting in his muddy gaze. And, one more thing. Top secret. Not a word, you hear. He licked his dry lips. The Seven Kingdoms, been stirring lately, ships in and out, if those bastards learn Bloodstone's an empty shell, hey. He trailed into a meaningless drunken laugh, the rest swallowed by his throat. Jorah nodded, keeping his face fixed in reluctant obedience, the picture of a man frustrated at being left behind yet bound by duty. But inside, the storm raged. He hadn't lifted a finger, yet all had fallen into his lap. Quen's intentions. Troop movements. Bloodstone's fatal weakness. Secrets he could never have reached, spilled out like beans by a drunkard's tongue. The rush of triumph, followed fast by the edge of fear, made sweat bead in his palms as he gripped the cup. He lingered long enough to match Roro with a few more empty toasts, listening to his rambling tales of pirate glory, before finding an excuse to leave. Outside the courtyard, the night wind cut cold, cooling the fire in his veins but sharpening his mind to a blade's edge. That night, in the quietest corner of Prince's Harbor, a raven with glossy black feathers and sharp eyes spread its wings. Cloaked in the dim moonlight, it rose soundlessly and vanished into the northwest sky like a ghost swallowed by the dark. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 50 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com/BlurryDream. Chapter 80. The armies of the Seven Kingdoms assemble. Dragonstone, beneath the stone drum. Great Lord Eddard Stark stood at the edge of a sheer cliff, the salty, icy wind lashing his weathered face and whipping his dark gray fur cloak into a frenzy. He lifted his gaze to the black stone fortress looming before him. Unlike any castle in Westeros, it seemed less a man-made structure than a primordial dragon, born from lava and nightmares, coiled menacingly upon the volcanic isle. Its twisted towers reared like heads, its winding, battlement-lined walls like the coils of its body. Countless grotesque gargoyles, half demon, half stone beast, jutted like jagged spines along its back. Now, rows of soldiers in black armor stood atop them, long spears in hand, silently watching the steel tide gathering below. The air was thick with a suffocating stench, the salty tang of the sea, the iron bite of rusting steel, the musky odor of tanned leather, and the mingled sweat, grease, and nervous tension of tens of thousands of men. Banners of bright and somber hues snapped in the wind. The dire wolf of the north, the roaring lion, the golden rose, the sun and spear, the crowned stag. The sigils of the Seven Kingdoms converged here, a display of power unmatched, heavy enough to crush the breath from the air. Then came a heavier tread, loud and metallic, joined by the hurried patter of attendants and the clatter of silver and steel. King Robert Baratheon approached, surrounded by lords, courtiers, the Kingsguard, and a gaggle of young squires carrying great jugs of wine, silver platters, and even roasting spits. His bloated bulk strained inside heavy plate, each step booming like a smith's hammer. Tucked under one arm was his great visored helm, exposing a face puffed and ruddy from drink and excess, veined with red, his thick black beard bristling like thorns. Ned. Robert's booming laugh crashed like war drums, drowning the clamor around them. He strode up to Eddard, reeking of wine, and with his gauntleted hand slammed the direwolf on his friend's shoulder so hard it sent pain lancing through his back. Ha! Years go by and you're still the same. Haven't changed a bit. He laughed loudly. Eddard steadied himself, studying his old friend. Robert's face was more bloated than when they'd last met at Pike, his eye bags deep, his once bright blue eyes now bloodshot and dull. Even beneath his finely crafted plate, his gut bulged alarmingly. Eddard realized that the memory of Robert as he had been, tall, handsome, sharp, was fading, leached away by the years. Time had stripped away that image, just as it had not at the indomitable stag who once triumphed at the Trident. Your Grace. Eddard inclined his head slightly, his voice steady. You've changed more than a little since those days. Robert barked a laugh, half a curse. Ah, damn you, Ned. You're the only man in the Seven Kingdoms who dare say that to his king. With a note of pride, he patted the curved breastplate that cleverly accommodated his swelling belly. The smiths of King's Landing had worked their craft well, and Robert had paid dearly for armor that could still fit him. Eddard turned the talk to business. Tell me then, Your Grace, how do you plan to take the stepstones? Robert glanced toward Paxter Redwyn, the king's appointed naval commander and leader of the campaign. With John Arryn remaining in King's Landing during Robert's absence, Paxter now held the greatest authority among the lords here. Paxter looked frail, his shoulders slumped, his thin frame topped by only a few wisps of orange-gold hair. He addressed Lord Stark. Lord Stark, Lord Varys has gathered detailed intelligence on the Eastern Sorcerers' battle plans. They are currently massing troops on Broken Spear Isle, pinning Tyrosh in place. Therefore, our primary objective is to seize their stronghold, Bloodstone Island. Bloodstone Island. Lord Eddard Stark fell silent in thought. The Dornish prince, clad in gleaming bronze armor, smiled faintly. The largest island in the Stepstones, directly opposite Sunspear. Every night the Dornish can hear the sounds of pirates and whores reveling on Bloodstone. The lazy voice of a Baron Martell, Prince of Dorne, drifted into the council. His lips carried that perpetual, mocking smile with hidden bite, as though this war council, on which the fate of the realm might rest, were nothing more than a play for his amusement. Lord Paxter shot him a cold glance. Ignoring the Prince of Dorne, he turned to the assembly, his finger landing firmly on Bloodstone. According to reliable reports, Bloodstone is the Easterners' most heavily stocked supply base in the Stepstones. If we seize it, we gain a foothold, a solid bridgehead from which we can advance or retreat. His finger shifted eastward. From there, our fleet can sweep the eastern islets, clear out the remnants, and finally join with our Tyrosh allies to crush the Easterners' main host in a pincer strike. Sir Quen Lannister, who until now had held his silence, finally spoke. Clad in shining gold-andered plate, the roaring lion on his chest glimmered, though his voice was low and heavy with doubt. Reliable reports. Lord Paxter, do you mean? Sir Jorah Mormont. He paused, his hawk's gaze sweeping across the room. In his secret missive, he spoke of an elite legion under the Easterners' command, clad in Valyrian steel, moving strangely, nearly undying. Is this not too far-fetched? A baron gave a sharp, mocking laugh, shrill as a night owl's cry. Oh. Since when did the proud lion of Castley Rock take interest in the drunken ravings of tavern scum, or the ghost stories spun by exiled knights to save their hides? Or is it that the Lannisters' courage has grown soft as silk? Kevin's face darkened at once. His hand fell to the lion-headed hilt at his side, muscles tightening beneath his golden-red plates. Eddard Stark stepped forward before tempers broke. His voice was grave. Sir Jorah Mormont bears the heavy crime of slave trading, wanted across the Seven Kingdoms. His credibility is already suspect. And being deep in enemy lands, eager for pardon, he may exaggerate or even invent such tales to prove his worth. He cast his gaze over the lords, his tone carrying the North's blunt caution. Until we see it for ourselves, we should treat all such claims beyond reason with care. Sensing the atmosphere turn taut as a bowstring, Lord Paxter quickly interjected. My lords, whether this so-called undying legion exists, whether it is exaggeration or truth, one fact remains undeniable and must be faced. The Easterner has, in a short span, unified the Stepstones entire, save only Tyrosh. His soldiers number, by modest count, over 10,000, and he commands no fewer than 100 oared warships. This strength cannot be ignored. Just so. The Eastern Sorcerer has united the Stepstones. Once he takes Tyrosh, he will march upon the Seven Kingdoms. We must hold him at the Narrow Sea. King Robert cast Lord Paxter an approving glance. A baron, though, seemed untouched by the grim mood. He straightened lazily, as if searching the room. Such fire in the air, yet the true master of this hall is missing. Cruel amusement curved his lips. Where is Lord Stannis? The great lord of Dragonstone, master of ships. Will he begrudge us even his presence, at so grand a departure, to bid farewell to his grace and his fellow lords? Though softly spoken, every word carried clearly through the chamber. Robert's face darkened at once, purple with rage. Lord Paxter's expression grew as heavy as Dragonstone's storm-laden sky. Do not speak his name. Robert roared. If he will not march, let him rot here with his stone dragons. Since the king's landing on Dragonstone, Stannis had hidden behind the excuse of military duties, sending men in a barely repaired royal fleet, but refusing to march himself, claiming he must guard the island against attack. For Lord Paxter, who bore old grievances against him, even the name Stannis brought a surge of irritation. His eyes fell darkly on Garland Tyrell, the second son Mace Tyrell had sent. The youth stood with a hand on his sword hilt, watching the outspoken Dornish prince warily. Damn these Dornishmen. Paxter cursed inwardly, temples throbbing harder than when commanding fleets. Your Grace. He forced down his anger and frustration. The eastern host is held fast at Broken Spear Isle, leaving Bloodstone lightly defended. Our fleet stands ready. Give the order, Your Grace, let us set sail and strike Bloodstone at once. Robert drew a deep breath, as if to turn all his fury into strength. He raised his massive warhammer high overhead, the cruel spikes on its head glinting coldly in the dim light. With every ounce of strength, he bellowed a deafening roar. Forward! For the Seven Kingdoms, crush them! Woo! A heavy, mournful horn blast, like a dragon's lament, split apart Dragonstone's brooding sky. One call followed another, echoing between the jagged cliffs and rolling across the harbor. In an instant, Dragonstone's somber harbor boiled with life. Like a slumbering beast awakened, the vast fleet began to stir. Thick ropes were cast loose, heavy iron anchors hauled up with the groaning of winches. Great square sails and triangular sails snapped open like banks of cloud, swelling under the sea wind with a thunderous, muffled boom. More than 400 warships of every size rose into a forest of sails that blotted out the sky, slowly gliding away from the harbor's jagged black reefs. On every deck and along every bulwark, soldiers from the Seven Kingdoms crowded shoulder to shoulder. Clad in every kind of armor, gripping weapons that glinted coldly, their faces showed murder, fervor, or emptiness, melding into a suffocating tide steeped in the stench of rust and blood. 5,000 from the north, led by Lord Eddard Stark. 6,000 raised by Sir Quen Lannister of the Westerlands. With Jon Arryn holding King's Landing and his heir too young, the eastern host marched under Lord Yohn Royce of Runestone, bringing 4,000 men from the Lords of the Vale. The south sent the most. House Tyrell sought to make a show. Highgarden alone, under Garland Tyrell, fielded 3,000, House Hightower another 2,000, and Commander Paxter himself added 2,000 more. With 200 warships, the Reach sent 10,000 in all. The Stormlands, Lords, beneath Renly Baratheon, mustered 5,000. The Riverlands, under the Blackfish and Edmure Tully, sent 5,000. Prince Aberon of Dorne brought 3,000. To these were added 3,000 from the Crownlands and 2,000 from the Iron Islands under Captain Victarion. The Seven Kingdoms had gathered 43,000 soldiers, more than 400 warships, and a massive train of supply vessels loaded with provisions, siege engines, and countless laborers, all bearing down on their target, the island called Bloodstone. Never had the winds of the narrow sea carried such a heavy, choking reek of rust and blood. The storm of war had come.